Hey guys, after about a 1-week break, I'm back. The retreat is wrapping up, and one of our guests here, Jay, turned out to have some pretty profound knowledge of the works of the Pythagorean Illuminati and Mike Hockney. And this stuff dovetails with my own visions and experiences, and we'll kind of get into the sort of idea of downloads and how I sort of got involved with all of this stuff. And basically what's happened is I've gotten this tremendous confirmation in the form of having encountered some of the Pythagorean Illuminati stuff pretty recently. So I guess let's start at the beginning. And I've always, of course, been obsessed with metaphysics and trying to find the answers to the universe, and it's pretty echoey. Uh-oh. Well, that doesn't sound good. Oh, that's because there's echo on. See what I mean about the settings getting changed? Man, see, I didn't want that. All right, so that should be better. What's going on? Popsicles. So at any rate, I was really obsessed with metaphysics and all of these questions, and I noticed very young that I would hear certain words or phrases like Gnostic, and I just knew, I gravitated towards these things that spoke to my soul, and just kind of intuitively knew where I would find the puzzle pieces and the answers that I needed. And this kind of persisted throughout my entire life until eventually I had constructed, I guess, a metaphysic or a type of ontology, and kind of formatted this sort of belief system, although I'm using the term belief system really loosely because, you have to remain fluid and watch out for dogma and not get caught in any of the ego traps that the snares are everywhere. But basically, over time, I started to realize that these ideas that I was getting about what consciousness was, what the universe was, and a lot of the questions that I was asking about our perception of how the universe actually works as, I guess, modern deterministic people, that there were legitimately huge holes in our worldview. And as I really dived deeper and deeper into this stuff, I realized that what I had downloaded was basically the secrets of the Illuminati, or as we'll see, according to the Pythagorean Illuminati, who, by the way, are not like single writers. They are, what are they called? Those pseudonyms?
Yeah, pseudonyms.
Yeah, so there's like 200 books, right?
About 200 books.
Yeah, so totally lost my train of thought there. Yeah, what the hell was I talking about? Oh, well, I started to realize that what I was downloading was the secrets of the Illuminati, which, you could call it a download, or it could be that an intelligent mind that is not constrained by the influences of doctrine and dogma and all of this stuff will eventually figure it out. And that's what I was saying about the Pythagorean Illuminati, whose position is, I think you said, if there's a brain in a vat, using pure reason, it would eventually come to these conclusions. And that's one of the most powerful and important aspects of all this, that all of the things that are considered to be secrets of the Illuminati or the Western occult tradition are actually painfully obvious once you understand them. And what it forces you to realize is the real extent of the indoctrination and brainwashing and programming that we have endured. And when that starts to fall away, you realize really the severity of it and how severely. In fact, the Illuminati is one of the great examples of this kind of manipulation, because we're basically taught by the mainstream narrative. People think it's an alternative narrative, but it's actually not. It's a mainstream narrative that the Illuminati are evil, that they're Satanists, that they're trying to trap everyone in the world in a matrix. And, there are people doing that, but it's not the Illuminati. If you just look at the name Illuminati and you actually look at Adam Weisshup's writings, what they're about is using pure reason and logic to actually understand the universe and our role in it so that we can relate to it properly, get the most out of our lives, and significantly reduce the wasted human potential and also suffering and, all of this despotism. It's the great revolution that has been prepared by the ages. As Albert Pike wrote, when it begins to march, we will experience amelioration from superstition, religion, despotism, slavery, all of these evils of modern humanity. And so my perception, basically in a nutshell, was that in the beginning, there was this nothingness, and that nothingness became aware that it was there. And somehow that is reflected by the sudden appearance of light. That part of the Bible, as far as I can tell, is true. And then the Logos is actually a vibration, which is the electromagnetic wave fluctuating. And so this process, basically, of awareness vibrating gave order to the primordial stew of chaotic energy in the beginning of time and imposed symmetry on this energy. And then so over time, this process of replication by reflection continues and continues, and it goes from, having just the one thing, which is paradoxically only nothing. Only nothing can be one. But it divides like a cell, because everything is a reflection of this original process. So you can see this when you see a cell divide. But in the beginning, this thing divided into two, and now we had antinomies, we had duality, we had opposites, male and female, dark and light. You could think of it even maybe as God and devil. And so every smaller part that was generated by it has the same structure as the original dynamic nothing, I think, is what the Pythagorean Illuminati basically call the universe. And that's exactly correct, right? I mean, it's still nothingness in the sense that if you zoom into this table with an electron microscope, it's going to expand and expand and expand and expand and expand, and you can continue expanding that probably infinitely. So basically, the process continues until it reaches what I just thought of as all of the potentials fulfilled, but it sounds like the Pythagorean Illuminati's version of that is maximum.
Well, it's a cyclical process that goes on forever. So a universe reaches maximum neg entropy, the opposite of entropy, ceases to exist, and a new universe begins. And that's just the contingent realm, which takes place within the eternal realm of eternal truths. And that's you alluded to all these things and everything you said, but I might have to walk through from the start to intersect everything you said with what they believe, basically.
Yeah, that's the idea. And what one of the things I'm trying to outline here is that it's really remarkable that I came to this exact conclusion about this stuff, knew that it was scientific illuminism without ever having read any of it. And then, I stumble into this stuff years and years later, and it's exactly correct. And a lot of you guys know that this is true because you've been watching for years, and you were aware when I became aware of the Pythagorean Illuminati, and I still haven't read it. So that's why it was so remarkable the other night after ceremony to have this conversation and realize that, this is exactly the perception that I have in these authors' books, and they do claim to be legitimate Illuminatists, and that's actually the first thought I had when I saw any of their writings. So do you want to talk a little bit about the sinusoidal wave and what, give a basic foundation? By the way, you guys, this is probably going to be a series, so we're just going to give a little bit of an overview because I think dinner's almost ready, and just kind of get into the basics of it, and then keep your eyes out because we're going to continue to there's 200 books, so we can talk about this for a while.
There's a lot of repetition. Once you understand the basics of it, you can you start getting the knack of using your own mind to discover the rest of it, using rationality and intuition simultaneously. Because all this is achievable by anybody just using a natural intelligence, basically. So the sinusoid thing, well, to go back to what you said earlier, you mentioned the saying that God said, "Let there be light." the Pythagorean Illuminati, and I'll just say the PI for short, they would say that God is light. There's no being that said, like, that created anything. There's just an eternal, necessary, logically necessary order to all existence. There's only one possible existence. And it never had a beginning and it never has an end. And that is the context from which all possible realities can and do unfold. And and we exist in it right now, temporarily, right now we exist in a contingent realm that takes place within this eternal realm of like eternal mathematical truths. And just that alone, that resonates with a lot of metaphysical systems, but the things that they add to that is actual mathematical arguments and things straight out of like Leibniz, Descartes, Pythagoras, Plato, and they talk about systems from all time around the world. One thing you did mention, and I'm going to look into this further, is about how similar this stuff is to Crowley. And to my knowledge, they don't really talk about him or give him credit for anything, but it's not necessarily the case that they took things from him. He might have taken things from them.
Both parties.
It's kind of unclear if, like...
Both parties do claim initiation in scientific illuminism, basically. So, you know, one of the things that's posited by these groups is that this knowledge has been around forever, and that really all of the religions are deliberate bastardizations of this knowledge, and that's actually why they fly with people, because, you know, they realize, they resonate, everyone knows the truth within them, everyone contains the truth. We all walk around in this reality and we can perceive this truth all the time. Everything that we look at really radiates and exhibits and exemplifies these truths and realities. So it actually takes cloaking of the knowledge, and it has to be planted in the consciousness of people before they're able to process and realize it. This is the reality, that the religions are constructed on the basis of understanding this stuff, but they're designed to prevent people from actually having actual spiritual knowledge and spiritual awakening. They're literally a trap to keep people from realizing their true eternal and infinite power. So where were we at with the whole connection between Crowley and nothing? The idea of nothing and a dynamic nothing and these omega and alpha points are kind of interesting. Maybe we can flesh that out a little bit.
I'd like to hear more about what Crowley's thoughts are about that kind of stuff. I'll just start talking about what the PI think, and you can tell me if it resonates with any Crowley stuff, you know. So everything in the Illuminist worldview is predicated on the PSR, which stands for the principle of sufficient reason, which comes from Leibniz. It's a way older than that, but Leibniz formalized it, and it just stands for everything that exists, there is a rational explanation for why it is the way it is and not otherwise. So everything is subject, its existence is predicated on a sufficient reason, and nothing can exist without a sufficient reason. And with that fundamental assumption, which isn't a really assumption once you understand the explanation for that, because it begs the question, why is there the PSR and why is existence predicated on the PSR? And the way to understand that is to understand zero, like to answer the question, why is there something rather than nothing? So that's kind of where all the system begins. And there are two types of nothing. There is static nothing that does nothing, and it can be mathematically modeled by an infinite set of static points that don't do anything. And the other type of nothing is a dynamic net nothing. And these are just the mathematical properties of zero. Like, nobody's adding this onto it. This is just ontological zero. This is like the base of existence. Everything can be understood through mathematics the mathematics of zero and infinity, pretty much.
And it's interesting too because these guys aren't just making this stuff up. There are actually, zeros of a different order of magnitude are a mathematical reality. So this idea of zero or nothingness that exists in different contexts with different properties is actually something that exists just in the realm of pure mathematics as well.
But all existence exists in the realm of pure mathematics. That's their whole system. It's called ontological mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
So,
speaking of ontological mathematics, I want to point out right now that there is a huge beef between Morg and these authors because he talks about ontological mathematics a lot, and I just don't want anyone out there to think that any of this is coming from him or influenced by him, because a lot of things have come out over the last year or so. He's apparently a really, really bad guy. And I just want to make it clear that even though I share a birthday with Morg and talk about almost exactly the same stuff, I hope it's not frozen. There's no real connection. So there's something we mentioned, Leibniz, and this is also important, and this is another example of something that I just kind of downloaded from I don't know where and then read later that it was a real thing. Leibniz's idea of monads. So many years ago, I had what I called the starseed vision, and it has nothing to do with the alien starseed new agey thing. It's just the name that I gave this vision based on what occurred. And so there was this streak of yellow that I originally processed as a spermatozoa of light. But I also understood it to be a unit of consciousness, a single unit of consciousness. And so the process was sort of visually presented to me, and this was not with drugs, this was just a totally normal state of mind, was presented to me where this photon basically went through all these stages of development until it became a star, and if it was successful at that, when it imploded and became a black hole, it was creating its own universe based on the experiences and energy and consciousness of that particular starseed, that little spermatozoa of light. But I think Leibniz's version of that is to call it a monad. And all of these little monads make up a greater monad. And there is both separation and unity simultaneously. And I guess, our individual job is to be the sensory organs of the universe and to experience and collect information, self-discovery. So again, we're kind of going back into that hermetic thing of microcosm, macrocosm, how all of the things that happened on a grand scale are also happening on the individual scale. A really great way that I've heard that expressed is that Keter is in Malkut and Malkut is in Keter. This is another indication that the ancients understood the true nature of reality. Some of these mystics do, because Keter is the light, basically. It's a formulation of the light, and then that light descends through the body of the macroprosopis, the atom Cadmon, and it crystallizes as matter in the foundation or in Malkut. And light or matter is actually light in a standing wave. So it's absolutely correct, this whole sort of mystical map of how these processes work. But at any rate, many years later, actually with San Pedro, I was shown again this reality of consciousness emanating from light, which, by the way, has all the properties that people attribute to God and nirvana. It's limitless, it's changeless at the speed of light. There is no time, there is no matter. It has a momentum, but it does not have mass. So it's literally ethereal. It's there, but it's actually not there in a sense. So, light literally fits the description of nearly every single, description of, the mystics and the, different religions and whatnot. So, yeah, so now can we jump back into how the monad functions, what it is, and kind of the Pythagorean Illuminati's version of...
Yeah, so interestingly, you gave kind of a Leibnizian version of monads, because he was, in his system, he did have one a supreme monad, but in Pythagorean Illuminism, it's all monads are completely equal, and functionally, they can become one, but they're not ever ontologically one. They're always ontologically distinct things, basically per the principle of identity, which is also from Leibniz. So each of these monads are eternal and necessary. It can never be destroyed. They never started. And it's basically a hive mind God. Well, so let me describe what a monad is. Based on what I was talking about with zero, basically a dynamic net zero is what just imagine like all positive and negative numbers added together. That is an example of
net zero.
A net zero. But we're talking about something that moves. It's motion, because if non-existence is modeled by static points that do nothing. And dynamic motion that nets to zero, or the most comprehensive set of dynamic motion that nets to zero, is basically what existence is. And that is represented in what they call the God equation, or the source formula, which is basically a generalized Euler equation. And it makes use of Euler circles, and basically a complete set of Euler circles, which are translatable to sinusoids, so every possible frequency or every possible complex number, all in a dynamic motion of an eternal motion of circles, basically circlings, that collectively form in one set is a monad. And since there can be one, there can be infinite or near infinite, depending on if there's an actual ontological reason limit for them, but I don't think they know of one. So I think usually they bounce back and forth between thinking it's an infinite set or maybe just a large plethora of monads. But in either case, it's functionally, that is the eternal mathematical realm. It basically, within it is the seed of all possible universes, all possible realities. Everything has been calculated from but this had no beginning in time. So it's zero is kind of a seed of everything, basically. That's another way of saying it. Like zero equals infinity in this kind of situation.
And that kind of brings us to another, similarity or condition that we have in common with other occult traditions and ideas, from the yin yang to Aleister Crowley's. Everything contains its contradiction. So, you can literally derive infinity from zero or from any number. So when we say that the all is in the all, and we say that your success will be your proof, you realize that in this system, you actually have functional ways of demonstrable proofs that these things are literally true. You can prove them with number. You can actually, demonstrate so that this system is not based on faith. And faith actually insists upon ignorance. You have to kind of be dumb, or agree to be dumb, or play dumb at least, in order to have faith in something for no reason. But in this kind of approach, you actually have some, solid certainty about certain elements and aspects of this stuff. And once you really understand how it works, and you have the pattern and you have the approach ingrained in your mind, then you can do this with all sorts of different constituent elements of this holographic mental reality, and you can extract these truths from all sorts of different systems and examples, because it's really about training the mind on how to run along certain lines so that it can perceive all of this stuff in every system that exists. I thought there was a question about, like when he said God said, "Let there be light" earlier. And, he was saying that it's not exactly like there's some being there that's like, oh, I'm going to make light now, which is how I've always thought about it as well. But that was basically a rabbi or whoever wrote that early Barashit, the first word in the book of Genesis. When they said God said, "Let there be light," it was really a childlike way, or a very unsophisticated way of saying that a vibrational wave created the light, that it emanated from a word, basically an oversimplification, so that people get some kind of notion of what's happening, but it's not the direct, clear, and concise truth. And I'm not really sure if that's a convenient condition that emerged organically, or if it was engineered that way deliberately in order to obscure the reality that's lying behind it while sucking people into the belief system. By the way, you guys, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support me on Patreon. And I'm demonetized, so unless you guys support me, I don't get any support. There is options in the chat, up at the top of the chat, where you can send PayPal and Zelle and all that sort of stuff. And, bear in mind, you guys, we did not organize this. We just had this conversation around the fire the other night, and I thought, you know what? We really need to jump on and let people know that the initiated secrets of the apoptyae of the Illuminati are actually public now, and they have been for a long time. And you don't have to believe them on faith. You can actually develop the ability to just think your way into supreme enlightenment. And because regardless of a lot of circumstances and a lot of appearances over the last, however long it's been that our culture has started to go down the toilet head first, it's true that in a lot of ways we are advancing. So I think it's, starting to dawn on a lot of people that we are inches away from dissolving the veil, from passing through the veil. And it doesn't take quite as much time or energy or information to liberate minds right now. That's literally the reason why there's so much effort being made to distract, to cause fear, to confuse, and divide. Because all it would take is a little bit of an angel's breath, and people's third eyes are going to pop open, and reason alone is enough to liberate us all. So the effort being made on the part of the anti-Illuminati, not the Illuminati. I am the Illuminati. He's the Illuminati. Mike Hockney is the Illuminati. Aleister Crowley was the Illuminati. Maybe not the best example of a nice Illuminati, but that's the reality. The illuminated ones have been striving to overt the system this whole time, and that is precisely why you have all been told to fear them, to not look at their work, to believe that they're evil, because they're, the tool that would liberate everyone is exactly what they're going to demonize. That's it's just painfully obvious when you think about it, and that's why they promote the institutionalized religions. They are traps to keep you stuck, and so they're telling you the antidote for the poison that kills you is the poison. And the overlords are trying to convince you that your liberators are your overlords. And I'm here to break that spell to whatever degree I'm capable. And, and I am finding allies and partners in this mission. And I have a funny feeling the whole process is about to really accelerate just in time for World War III. And, it's like literally at this point, we are at the now or never junction. We can either, illuminate ourselves and learn how to actually coexist with each other in the universe, or we can become stardust again. Either way, hell of a ride. But I think most of us would probably rather realize our fullest potential, which is really all this stuff is about. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do is discover your function, your true will, your highest purpose, and actually commit to find the courage, the intelligence, to recognize your sovereignty, and to step into that, and to be willing and able to shine the light anywhere that you have been unwilling to look or unable to see, and to integrate that knowledge and move forward with it without fear, without judgment. That is and it's accelerating because of the telescopic nature of the evolutionary paradigm. Faster and faster, the faster we go, the rounder we get. So let's keep milking the turkey. And all right. So do you have anything to add to all of that? I'm sure you do.
Well, yeah, I guess I could say that if you want to learn about this, the newest book is Mike Hockney's book that came out this year called Ontics, Ontics, which is kind of like a new term he's made up to talk about ontological mathematics, and making it a little bit more generalized and maybe distancing himself from Morg a little bit. And that's a really fantastic starting point, I would say.
Yeah, and it's important to remember, I mean, you can read the Book of Lies by Aleister Crowley, you can read Mike Hockney stuff, you can study the Kabbalah, you can study Freemasonry. All these things are tremendously powerful tools. You can do ritual magic, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. Even if you don't believe in magic, that is still extremely useful, sort of sophisticated meditation, But what I'm getting at here is that it takes more than just scholastic, just reading, and you need to do that, but it's important to remember that you have to catalyze processes in order to make your integration of this knowledge fundamentally real and not just a matter of being able to regurgitate stuff that you've read. The real understanding is going to come from experience and processes that actually allow you to free yourself from indoctrination and your own beliefs, your limiting beliefs about yourself, and all of that kind of thing. You have to take care of your psyche. You have to take care of your emotional being. You have to take care of your physical being and your intellectual being. And I've noticed that of all of those things, for some reason, what we encounter in the current era is extreme intellectual laziness. People perceive tedious thought as unpleasant task and a burden, in my world, it's actually a delight. It's one of the greatest delights to be able to chew through all of this stuff and not to just, I don't understand learning as the absorption of people's ideas. It's a process of compressing information and extracting new information, and mostly by combining antinomies so that a third thing of a higher nature emerges. And so, there's much more to this process than just book study, but I mean, it really is an extraordinary fact that this kind of knowledge that used to be reserved for the adepts of the mysteries and the apoptiae, or the inner school, the inner circle of the Eleusinian mysteries and Pythagoras' original Illuminati, which is where all of this stuff kind of originated. I don't know, maybe you guys don't know the history, but it seems like adepts trickled out of Babylonian Syria, and it was absorbed into the pyramids, and then Pythagoras went to Egypt and then brought back the initiated knowledge and continued working on it himself. And so much of what we associate with secret societies today actually does trace back to Pythagoras, the secret handshakes, the interest in numerology and gematria, vibration and sound, ritual, all of the things that we associate with this stuff did indeed, you can trace them back to Pythagoras. He's asking, Mr. Something Else is talking about the Book of Lies, and since I mentioned that, I should explain that you can't just read through that. You need to, if you don't know the Ruach and the Nephesh and, all of these terms from Jewish mysticism, and you don't know that Layla is Arabic for night, none of these puzzles are going to make sense to you. So this is why a lot of people read this material and they think it's gibberish. But the reality is that you have to actually take the time to understand what it is that you're looking at, and then all of a sudden it's not gibberish anymore. So if you're going to try to read that book, you need to take the time to learn about whatever terms you encounter that you don't know what they are. And seek out the little clues and stuff that are going to open this stuff up. In fact, the entire symbolism of Freemasonry and the great secrets of the Western esoteric tradition are very thinly veiled in chapter 69, which is entitled The Way to Suck Seed and the Way to Suck Eggs. So apparently 69 meant what it does now all the way back then, which really surprised me. But it's actually a reference to the descending blue triangle and the ascending red triangle. And when they interlock, there is a big secret that emerges. And so I'm not going to tell you, but you can get a hold of Cosmic Trigger 1 by Robert Anton Wilson, who interestingly claimed to be in contact with Assyrian intelligence, which is something that I've experienced in very convincing circumstances. And the Hopi also have this thing with Sirius, and they also have secret handshakes, just like the Freemasons, who have the blue star in their lodge that is also Sirius. The Kofan here in Ecuador claim to communicate with beings on Sirius when they drink ayahuasca. So there's this crazy consistency and connection between all of this stuff. And I think I've just kind of gone off the deep end on a rant and don't remember why. Burmese the Majestic, I'm not sure exactly what that is. Burmese the Majestic. Yeah, so Sirius. I'm sure there was a reason why I was talking about that, but now so did we get into the sinusoidal wave at all? I mean, I don't know if like
barely scratching the surface on any of this right now.
What is the function of that?
Well,
basically,
so this, I mean, it's hard to say exactly because it's literally, I'm starting at bedrock. So this is like, everything ties into it. It's like the explanation of everything. So sinusoids in ontological mathematics are actually basis thoughts. They're actually mental. Everything is mathematical mind. Every monad is a mind, or in religious terms, a soul. And those are sinusoids, the function of sinusoids. It's basically all the properties in math that sinusoids have. And it's basically the most universal language. And that's why it's in their system, because nothing else could fulfill this role. And also, I mean, it self-organizes in such a way as to be able to underlie all possibilities, mathematical possibilities, and dynamically equal 0 at all times, always balanced to 0. And so this is basically the structure of everything, and structure underlies all possible experience. And the whole system postulates that we are constantly going through every possible mathematical universe, so to speak, every possible mathematical reality. And these happen in cyclical ways. And in our case, we live in a spatio-temporal universe with minds. And there's always this tension between mind and matter. How do you resolve this difference? Well, everything is mathematical mind. Everything is mental. And matter is explained through Fourier mathematics, Fourier transforms. And the whole contingent realm, which is a universe, and all these contingent minds that live and evolve through it, and eventually learn about their true nature, that they are these monads. And once they learn their monads, they basically become gods if they have enough cosmic understanding of everything, basically. Ontological, mathematical understanding of themselves. And this very much overlaps with so many mystical traditions, and particularly like Jungian psychology, because in Jungian psychology, basically God is hidden at the center of unconsciousness. And consciousness is on a journey to find that center. And that is what we experience as humans. And the way to find that center is to understand the true mathematical nature of reality and what your eternal soul is, and how that it underlies this contingent changing layer of existence. And by the way, all the monads are essentially singularities. Each sinusoid that a monad is composed of is a singularity. Monads are the irreducible atoms, so to speak, of existence. And so everything takes place within a singularity. All time, space, all change happens within an eternal, unchanging singularity. That's zero-dimensional, zero temperature. It's pure light. It's pure mathematics. It's pure thought. It's God's mind, essentially, of contemplating all possibilities.
And so I don't know if you guys noticed this or not, but I sort of predicated this stream on saying how surprised I was to see all of these things, all these conclusions that I'd come to. And then I've noticed also in the works of certain other people, he talks about how, everything is reducing to 0 all the time. And to understand how we could be in this dynamic nothingness, it's important to remember that time is not linear, we're told, in the sense that we experience it. And so this idea that everything is reducing to nothingness but yet being dynamic is actually the kind of idea that is the reason why we must expand our consciousness in order to understand the universe, because we have to be able to think beyond the normal constraints of our ordinary consciousness in order to see how all these things can function. And Aleister Crowley once wrote that all that's happening in the universe is that there is an equation balancing back to zero. And we actually can see that in entropy and other observable phenomena, that's what's actually going on. And I started this out by talking about my own vision of a photon eventually becoming a god. And, he's telling me that that's exactly the explanation that this Pythagorean Illuminati is, that's their position on it too. So it's just incredible to me that are these people that have come to these conclusions that are so specifically identical through their own internal processes, and largely it seems at least possible that without really directly influencing each other very much. And that is why one of the reasons I'm so inclined to say that it's all true. Because how is it that all these people that observe it from a perspective, the condition being met that they have liberated themselves from the mind-forged manacles of their own perception and ideas about themselves and their society and all of that, people come to the same conclusions. It's just like if I go to Egypt and I look out in the desert and there are pyramids, and the guy next to me, I'm like, hey, what do you see out there? And he's like, well, big-ass pyramids. Then you're like, okay, well, then they're real. So this is exactly the same thing, except that we're looking into a metaphysical window, and,
But you don't have to base your conclusion off of, other seemingly smart people coming to the same conclusion, because you can actually yourself know it for certain, because the only things that are certain are mathematical truths, provable mathematical certainties of reason. And that's basically... if you really want to understand it, you have to actually do the math, basically. Or do the reasoning. Basically means the same thing.
Yeah, reasoning and mathematics is the same. And I think when we're talking about mathematics in this context, it's a little bit different than just dealing with pure number. It is that, but it's also a reference to all of the other processes of absolutely sound logic and how that all pans out at the end of the day. Another thing that I don't think I mentioned that is important to all of this, I started talking about my starseed vision and what happens with that. But there's another element of that that I thought of as the Phoenix process, which is, I know people use that term to describe things. I don't know what that stuff is. I'm using it in my own way here, so don't make that association if you've read those Phoenix process books. But basically, that this nothingness became conscious. It creates everything it can within the strictures or confines of natural law. It can't violate natural law ever. This is why so many people fail at magic and they don't believe in God, because they've asked impossible things to happen. Everything is constrained by these laws. So those are the limitations. Without limitation, you can't have expression, right? So at any rate, everything that possibly can be fulfilled without violating any of the laws that allow for creation to exist. Once that condition is met, that's the point of maximum neg entropy, I guess is how the Pythagorean Illuminati would say it. And then the process reverses, and the light basically consumes itself, matter comes apart, and it collapses back into the singularity. The whole thing starts again. That was my version of it, but it sounds like that alpha and omega, and that's exactly what...
Yeah, so the beginning of a universe, you can call it the alpha point, and the end is always the same. It's when all monads arrive at the actual conclusion of what they are, and that's the omega point, when they achieve hive mind, like ultimate consciousness of truth, the whole truth, because there's only one answer to everything and infinite wrong answers. So that's why every universe ends the same way, basically merging with God, what's true, and a functional unity with all monads, a community of gods, so completely self-realized, and the physical universe of dimensional extended matter. It starts, if you know anything about physics, starts out at maximum neg entropy, but corresponding to that, the contingent minds of monads that are this whole thing is basically a holographic projection within the singularity of monads, using Fourier mathematics, converting these sinusoids into the properties that we see all around us. Everything is just the properties of math. And the contingent minds start off at maximum entropy, maximum unconsciousness. And through evolution, which is just basically solving the cosmic equation, all these minds return to the source. It's very like Neoplatonic in that sense.
To be reformatted, basically, because the energy can't go anywhere. There's nowhere to go. It just sort of condenses and then reformulates itself. Now, we get into some sticky territory here, because assuming this is all true, when the maximum neg entropy is that what's the point where there's it's all fully realized? What's the word?
Neg entropy.
Okay,
it's like the opposite of entropy.
Yeah, the
Or you
opposite
could
of
say
entropy.
centropy.
Yes, entropy sounds good. When you get to that point and the thing reverses and collapses, it would make sense. It would stand to reason that it's going to formulate the exact same circumstances again, and then when the process repeats, every single atom and quark and fucking muon and gluon and all of these things are in exactly the same position they were last time, and so the universe starts over exactly the same way. But then we see these really ingenious little technicalities that kind of allow for some variation, basically. And so, I mean, there are other ideas like how chaos and order are balanced 50%, and so the free will or deterministic argument is actually that it's kind of half and half both.
Yeah, I never got into that with you, but they have explanations for that as well.
But what I'm getting at here is that, physicists tell us that when they do these experiments in very, very tiny sections of time with very, very large amounts of energy, and they repeat them a billion times, which they can do because they have, they're trillionths of a billionth of a second is, how the time frame these things occur in. So they do it 100 billion times, and twice they get a different answer. And so that tells me that because microcosm, macrocosm, that all of these things are governed by the same rules, that there's an exception to every rule. And so when the universe is systole and diastole, expanding and contracting, and recreating itself in this phoenix process, it's basically a guarantee that there are at least going to be minute variations every time, because even a subatomic reaction is not consistently exactly the same, even if the particles involved and the circumstances are totally identical. So we have this sort of guarantee that there is going to be some kind of evolution. And then on top of that, because everything has these cycles, right? We know that entrainment, it causes anything that pulses to synchronize over time. Human hearts will do it, clocks will do it, electromagnetic waves will do it, power lines do it, clocks do it, everything does it. So if it's true that there are all of these multiverses, or however you want to think about it, monads, and they're all cycling, that means whatever one is at the highest point is going to draw the lower ones up, because things always entrain with the higher cycle. So whatever is towing the line at the very end of the chain of monads is going to be making it better. So that kind of tells me that it's a good possibility that as this thing cycles, it's rising and improving. That would be the logical.
Yeah, my interpretation is pretty much the same. That basically there's infinite room for improvement. We'll never reach a state where nothing can be improved anymore as far as like contingent realms go, universes go. There's infinite room between everything, and that allows us to continuously evolve and learn, and just make a succession of universes that tend to be better, at least.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think we're probably both hungry and dinner's probably ready. So, we're probably going to wrap this up here. And but these will continue. Obviously, we don't live in the same country, but we'll do some video chats and keep the stuff going. And we're also going to organize it to a higher degree. Although that wasn't bad. I felt like once we got our flow going, we kind of managed to put it all together. And definitely do me a favor and hit the like button and share these videos, because I get ignored by the algorithm. It doesn't like me, so I need your help. If we're going to get this message out to people, and it only takes a second to share a video. It also only takes a second to cash at me a Lamborghini or a couple of Ferraris, and I'm sure you all have one in your pocket, so get to it. And I want to thank Jay for sitting in on this stream and helping, because, you know, I'm in the rainforest. I don't really have access to Hockney's books. I just came across a few paragraphs and I realized what I was looking at immediately. And so, yeah, so here we are. So we'll see all of you guys again very soon. And, you know, just put your best foot forward and get on it. And there's infinite possibilities at your fingertips. And within you is the same universe full of miracles that we are describing external to us. But this is an interesting way this rabbi put this. Keter is in Malkut, but Malkut is in Keter, but after a different fashion. And so that means that, you know, matter is in light, because there is something sort of physical, a wave, that creates it. But light is also in matter, but it's in a standing wave. So, you know, all these things are the same and yet not the same. And so you are this infinite universe, but you are a microcosm rather than a macrocosm. You have cells instead of stars. Although we could get into, you know, depth about that and talk about the fact that you could make a nuclear bomb out of one of those cells, and so the stars are really in your cells. But we're out of time, so we're not going to do that right now. Thank you guys again, and good night. Well, that was good. I would say that was